All right, and our final speaker before the break is Ella Merkle. Ella is a marine conservationist and educator dedicated to advancing ocean conservation through interdisciplinary and creative solutions. You got a taste of this in the video you saw. She's also an excellent MC. If you need those services for any evening events on Catalina Island. But on a more serious note, Ella is a student who loves to learn, whether it was economics or ocean law and policy. She soaks it up. She doesn't complain, which is not a given in a 52-week program where you take 50 units. But she just really loves school, loves to learn, and really handled the course load and the complexity of the coursework like a real champ. During her time here, Ella became passionate about marine protected areas and their ability to offer science-based, flexible, and community-driven solutions for habitat and species protection. And so, for that reason, her presentation is called Doing Swell, a participatory tool for measuring well-being in coastal island communities. Welcome, Ella.
Thank you. This is the moment on December 12th, 2022, when over 190 countries pledged the largest conservation commitment to date. Known commonly as 30 by 30, it aims to protect 30% of land and water globally by 2030. This has inspired a surge of conservation initiatives. Domestically, the 30 by 30 goals have been adopted under the America the Beautiful initiative, and as well as at the state level in California. On land, we have seen an increase in the number of size and parks and preserves, but in the ocean, it's a little different. Marine protected areas, or MPAs, are sections of the ocean with different levels of protection from human activities. Like parks or preserves on land, MPAs are conservation tools that support the 30 by 30 goals. MPAs can be created with different goals, but share a primary objective of improving the marine environment by protecting economically valuable fish species, providing a safe space for threatened species, or by improving important habitats like coral reefs or kelp forests. We're actually sitting adjacent to two MPAs here at Scripps, where it is illegal to take or damage any living marine resource, but recreational activities are not. These MPAs are near the La Jolla and Scripps submarine canyons, which pump cold, nutrient-rich water towards the coast and sustain areas of beautiful biodiversity. These areas support the multitude of scientific activities occurring here at Scripps and draw hosts of tourists to La Jolla shores each year. But supporting science and attracting tourists are only two of the many different benefits of MPAs. Depending on the location, the biology, and the surrounding communities, MPAs can affect vastly different benefits. A 2023 study from Smithsonian researchers Nowakowski et al. Revealed that MPAs produce a list of co-benefits for fish and people. Data gathered from communities in Guatemala and Honduras revealed that just living close to an MPA resulted in lower levels of food insecurity and poverty and increased sustainable fishery use. These co-benefits are a great selling point to governments when advocating for new or improved MPAs, but these benefits are given less attention than their biological counterparts and are studied less frequently. When they are included, most non-biological benefits of MPAs are assessed through externally defined economic indicators. Externally defined indicators exclude the knowledge and insight of participation of the people who are interacting with their ocean every day. And economic indicators struggle to capture the psychological, cultural, or communal values associated with the ocean. They instead rely on the use of proxies, which may unintentionally distort or omit some value. A solely economic focus is especially insufficient for small island states. These are places that are predicted to be impacted most by climate change. They are disproportionately reliant on their ocean for economic resources and are intrinsically culturally connected to the ocean. MPAs can safeguard habitats that offer physical protection like reefs or mangroves on islands, and they can ensure that their fisheries remain fishable. But they can also alter how people have interacted with their oceans for generations. Therefore, understanding the complex reciprocal relationships that communities share with their oceans is necessary for effective MPAs. I designed a subjective well-being survey to understand the relationships between islanders and their oceans through the lens of well-being. The survey data paired with ocean use data collected by the Waite Institute will be used to inform the creation of MPAs. Well-being is the state of being with others, where human needs are met, where one can act meaningfully to pursue one's goals, and where one enjoys a satisfactory quality of life. The well-being is comprised of three important dimensions: the material, relational, and subjective. The three dimensions of well-being are best illustrated here in White's triangle of well-being. The equilateral triangle emphasizes that each dimension is equally important and interconnected. Subjective well-being is intentionally at the apex of the triangle, because even though an individual may have access to material or relational resources, their perceptions about their access to those resources ultimately dictate their ability to exercise them to the fullest extent. Material well-being is the objective, observable outcome of well-being. It includes material resources such as food, income, shelter, access to services and natural resources, and environmental quality. Relational well-being describes what people do and how they interact with others to achieve their needs and a good quality of life. And subjective well-being refers to people's perceptions about how they feel about their situation and quality of life, and it pays attention to the values and beliefs that people have which shape those perceptions. These dimensions can be operationalized by breaking them down into defined, quantifiable indicators. For example, some measurable indicators of material well-being are income, quality of your home, or your physical health. Relational indicators of well-being are measured by one's level of trust in their community or the level of support they receive from their friends and family. Subjective indicators of well-being are one's level of contentment with their identity or their perceived ability to achieve their goals. I adopted existing indicators to increase the legitimacy and transferability of my survey. I adopted most indicators from the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. The OECD is an intergovernmental organization made up of 38 member countries that seeks to stimulate economic progress. In 2020, they published their 5th edition of the How's Life Framework, which measures well-being across 80 different indicators. I selected additional indicators from the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment's Ecosystems and Well-Being Framework, as well as studies from Mbaro et al. And Gurney et al. I ultimately chose 11 indicators for their applicability in a range of different communities and their relevance to marine spatial planning. It's an intentionally short list that should be adapted or modified to best suit the community it is assessing. The utility of this survey is based on the fact that 1, islanders are inherently linked socially, culturally, economically, and psychologically to the marine environment, and 2, that those connections influence their well-being. This connection means that ocean users are also those who may be impacted, positively or negatively, by changes in ocean use resulting from MPAs. Measuring well-being is therefore a useful tool for viewing possible impacts and forming the best practices for MPA creation to ensure that MPA co-benefits persist. The survey consists of a series of 11 statements that are related to one dimension of well-being. For example, the OECD defines income as an important indicator of material well-being, as having enough income determines a household's ability to acquire goods or services that support well-being. To assess income, the respondent will be asked to answer how strongly they agree or disagree with the statement, "I have enough income to provide for my household," on a scale of 1 to 10. This statement is repeated for an additional 10 well-being statements. Using a numerical scale for answers is extremely valuable in cultures where asking directly about income or familial relationships may be seen as inappropriate or intrusive. And rather than defining adequate income or housing and assessing households based on those standards, each respondent answers about their situation subjectively. This subjectivity increases the applicability and efficacy of the survey because what is enough for one household may be wholly different from another, but still be enough. The subjectivity of the survey furthers its flexibility so that it can be administered throughout different communities and cultures. And the results for each household can be generated by simply averaging the responses to each statement. Let's say we have 3 different communities on the beautiful Scripps Island. This island is known for its unprecedented number of ocean scientists. Scripps' government has committed to protecting 30% of its ocean by 2030 and is seeking to implement new protected areas. In each community, a number of households are surveyed relative to the community's population to achieve a representative sample. In general, the smaller the population, the larger the necessary sample. For example, for populations under 1,000, a minimum ratio of 30% is required to ensure representativeness. Scripps Island has a small population of only 1,000 people, so the survey will be administered to 300 ocean-using individuals. Thankfully, communities A, B, and C have equal populations on Scripps Island, so only 100 households are surveyed from each. Community-level scores are calculated by averaging the household responses in each community, and show here that communities A, B, and C have different well-being scores. And these scores can be used to influence the creation of MPAs in different ways. They can highlight communities that are not as well off, such as Community B. This can offer meaningful insight to potentially vulnerable communities during the conservation planning process and can guide adaptive management measures. They can showcase differences between communities. This is most useful in the early conservation planning process and can be applied to a prioritizing modeling process. These scores, along with levels of resource dependence data, can help avoid or minimize negative impacts of on communities. For example, Scripps Island wants to protect a native seagrass species by implementing an MPA that restricts bottom trawling. Here, communities A and C have similar seagrass species that are bottom trawled. But the MPA will restrict the community's ability to bottom trawl in the area. And when comparing the communities, communities A's score is higher and may be indicative of a stronger, more resilient community that can better adapt to the restrictions imposed by the MPA. Lastly, changes in community well-being can be observed over time if administered pre, during, and post-MPA creation. It is important to note that this tool does not elucidate the mechanism of changes in well-being, but it instead highlights changes that can guide researchers to better understand the cause of those changes. As we strive to meet our 30 by 30 goals, it is essential that when we are looking to improve our existing MPAs or to implement new ones, that we ensure both the people and our marine environment are prospering. By surveying the well-being of ocean users, conservationists can use data to best inform practices for implementing effective, mutually beneficial MPAs, and to guide research to further the understanding of community-level impacts. There is an inextricable link between the oceans, islands, and their communities, which necessitates their inclusion for successful, sustainable MPAs. I'd like to thank my Capstone Advisory Committee, Brooke Dixon, Noah Greenberg, and Dr. Mark Jacobson for their guidance in creating this survey. I'd also like to thank my wonderful cohort. Sharing this year with you has been an incredible experience. I'd like to thank our listeners here and afar, my mom and Donna for traveling to be here, and just taking the time to see what we've been working on this year. And I'll take questions. Oh, I see a question.
Thank you so much, Ella. So how often should a survey like this be conducted?
That's a great question. So there isn't one specific answer, but the baseline recommendation is that well-being surveys should be conducted at least annually. That gives you enough time to observe changes, but also gather enough data that you can create time series. So at minimum, a year, but I'm a believer that the more data, the better. So it can also be beneficial.
Building on that question, does it matter if you go back to the same respondents from the first time, or do you want to get different respondents each time?
Absolutely. So panel data is when you survey the same people over time and is absolutely necessary when conducting these types of surveys. We're trying to minimize any sort of outside variance, which is obviously unavoidable when working in communities with people, just working in this world in general. So by surveying the same people over time and ensuring that they are a representative sample of the population allows us to track changes while minimizing variation that may affect our data.
I've got a quick question, Ella. As you mentioned, 30 by 30 is something that's really taken off, both on a state level and on a federal level, and then of course also on a global level. You hear a lot about marine protected areas, but not as much about the people. And I'm curious, what was your inspiration for designing a people-centered approach to understanding conservation impacts?
Yeah. So social science was definitely not my background coming into this. It wasn't something that I was super comfortable with. But over the year, there was a really common theme that was emphasizing talking to the people who are most relevant and impacted by these conservation initiatives, not only to gain like their invaluable insight, because there is so much local or traditional knowledge associated with using the ocean, but also because they offer such a diverse range of perspectives. And after really learning that and trying to integrate that into my work over the last year, I wanted to ensure that my capstone was also representative of that theme. And I truly believe that this type of representation and even subjective well-being is a great way to incorporate stakeholders and highlight their voices and just give the most well-rounded conservation approach.
So Dr. Murray kind of stole my question. I guess I'll just make a comment then. As an Indigenous person, seeing this makes me so proud and excited. Just reading those few questions that you had up there and the way that you've designed this makes it extremely inclusive and also very equitable, which I know is your goal. I hope that that next step is that diversity factor that's in there, and that I'm sure you're going to have a way of doing that. I don't know how. I just hope that you are able to keep that diversity in there, because this sounds like such a great idea, especially for MPAs. So thank you.
Thank you.